Welcome to the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce.
The Falmouth Chamber is dedicated to working on behalf of our members to make Falmouth a better place to live, work, and conduct business. We are committed to developing the economic, cultural, educational, and civic interests of our community and welcome the support from all organizations to achieve our combined goals. Whether you call Falmouth home, are a summer resident, or a visitor, we hope you take advantage of all that the Chamber has to offer.
Okay, good evening. I would like to open the Monday, February 27th, 2023 meeting of the Falmouth Select Board. It is now 6 p.m. and I will entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, non-union personnel.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor by roll call.
Brown, aye.
Patterson, aye.
Scott Price, aye.
Zelinski, aye.
Taylor, aye. And the board will return to public session at 6:30. Good evening. I would like to call to order the meeting of the Falmouth Select Board. It is Monday, February 27, 2023. It is 6:32 p.m. and the board is returning from executive session where we discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, non-union personnel, and no vote was taken, and we will continue that conversation. So I would ask that you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I would ask that everyone please silence your cell phones and notify me as the chair or if you are making any video or audio recording of this open public session. The placement and operation of the recording equipment should not interfere with conducting this meeting. Okay, we will move on to proclamations, and I would actually like to read this proclamation. This is the proclamation in recognition of the Waquoit Congregational Church. Whereas the Waquoit Congregational Church was gathered in the village of Waquoit in the town of Falmouth in 1848, And whereas the church is classic Greek Revival architecture enhanced by its historic white and dark green paint scheme and its important role in the early life of Wacoit Village have been recognized by the National Registry of Historic Buildings. And whereas the church serves as a gateway to the town of Falmouth from the east, while its steeple continues to serve as a beacon for sailors and pilots alike. And whereas the church, as the oldest public building in Wacoit, has, since its inception, played a vital role in the community as a gathering place for people in the village of Wacoit and beyond, and whereas the church continues to serve the wider community with its many programs, activities, and missions both locally and internationally, now therefore, the Select Board of the Town of Falmouth hereby proclaims March 12, 2023, as the Wacoit Congregational Church Day in Falmouth, Massachusetts, on the occasion of its 175th anniversary. We have unto set our hand and caused the great seal of the town of Falmouth to be affixed on this 27th day of February 2023. Nancy R. Chair, Angela Scott Price, Vice Chair, Samuel H. Patterson, Douglas C. Brown, and Edwin Scott P. Zielinski II. Second. Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And congratulations, I don't see Reverend Nell. Congratulations to the Wacoit Church. And I will present this proclamation to them on March 12th. Okay, recognitions. Any recognitions from the board?
I'd just like to recognize that I read an interesting article in the Enterprise this week about former educator and principal Emma T. Barrow.
Mm-hmm.
She came to Falmouth in 1959, and she got a job at the Woods Hole School, where she went on to be, I think, the principal there, and then eventually became the principal at Mullenhall School until 1985 when she retired. And it turns out that 1959, she was the first person of color to be a teacher on all of Cape Cod. So it's nice that she did that here in Falmouth. So.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Yeah.
Any other recognitions? She was also the principal of the Mullenhall School, wasn't
Right.
she?
She was.
Yes. Okay, announcements. Any announcements from the board?
I have one, and I'm not really clear 100% on it, but I saw that Recovery Without Walls is having an event where they're looking for sponsors for bike ride event that's coming up. I wish I had more information about the actual date. I didn't write it down and bring those notes with me. But it's a great organization, and it's supporting women in recovery right now. It's the focus of it, and they're having a bike-a-thon or something. So if you look up Recovery Without Walls, if you're interested to support them, they have a interesting sponsorship offer for businesses where you can get your name posted on their social media and so forth. So I think I'm going to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Yeah.
Anything else from the board? Any other announcements? Okay, we'll move into public comment. Public comment may be made on routine matters not on the agenda this evening. Comments are limited to 2 minutes. Please introduce yourself, and since the matter has not been included on the agenda, the Select Board will not participate in any discussion of your topic. It is not appropriate to use the public comment period to comment on any person's reputation, character, physical condition, mental health, disciplinary matters, or civil or criminal charges. Comments about job performance and decisions made are permissible. Is there anyone here for public comment? Okay, I'll start with Mr. Moriarty and then Ms. Carey.
I'd like to pass this out to each member, if I may.
What is it, Mr. Moriarty?
It's just an article, a recent article on what's going on in the East Coast.
Did you by any chance send that via email? Did I see it on my
I
email?
believe you might have,
Okay,
but here's another one just in case.
okay.
It's a very important issue. It needs to be brought into the public light.
Thank you, sir. She will, but you can leave it right there.
Good evening, everyone. My name is David Moriarty, Precinct 6, and I'd just like to bring some information to the citizens of Falmouth that's going on the East Coast of United States in these recreational beachfront communities. At least 30 New Jersey males want offshore wind halted as whale deaths mount. There's been 11 whale deaths in the last month in New Jersey alone. When they built the Block Island project, there were 7 dead whales washed up on the beach. This is a serious problem. And, you know, Falmouth without its tourist industry and without its beaches and its boating, we're just not going to make it. And we just cannot afford to have dead whales washing up on our beaches this summer. If you don't make it in the summer in this community, you don't make it year-round. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moriarty. Ms. Carey?
Hi, I'm Rosemary Carey, Precinct 5, and I'd like to make a comment about the Sustainability Director position. I don't see it on the agenda, but so it is very important, it's urgent actually, that our town get this position hired and funded in FY '24. In April 22, town meeting members with overwhelming support voted for the hiring of a sustainability director or another high-level position to fully integrate and drive sustainability the sustainability agenda through the town's strategic planning, policies, and implementation, and also to research and apply for grants. Grant writing is an important role right now because there are millions of dollars available at this time. But that's only part of the picture. A sustainability director, a highly qualified sustainability director would help improve safety, resiliency of our town, help us get solar on our school roofs, and you know, bring economic benefits to our town. So the time is now to get that position classified and hired. And any further delay ignores the will of town meeting and of the priorities of this select board. Thank you for taking my comments.
Thank you. And we will be bringing that up. We'll be talking about that when we talk about the articles. Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes?
This would be a public comment.
You need to come up to the microphone and please introduce yourself.
My name is Lynn Shad, Precinct 3, and this would be a comment about the position for a sustainability director. So good evening, Chair Taylor and members of the Select Board. I am in favor of creating and funding a sustainability director position here in Falmouth. In spring 2020, the town made a decision to adopt a climate emergency declaration. They were not just words, that was a call to action, and we need to come to action. At Falmouth Spring Town meeting in 2022, members overwhelmingly approved the creation of a full-time sustainability director, and that was recommended and prioritized by this board. The more recent decision by the board and the finance department to withdraw financing for the position of a sustainability director is short-sighted and not in the best interest of the town. In fact, it takes the decision out of the hands of the town. Falmouth is a coastal community currently threatened by the effects of sea level rise brought on by climate change. It is not a distant problem. It is here and now. The timing couldn't be better to create the position of a sustainability director. Federal infrastructure bills send a clear message to states and towns that they will support our move to cleaner, more equitable, and sustainable communities. It puts money behind those words. The 2030 and 2050 goals of the Massachusetts Climate Roadmap to reduce carbon emissions need town programs implemented now in order for us to meet those goals. These goals are also not just words, they are actionable steps to ensure our futures. The position of Sustainability Director is an essential investment in the development of these steps and the future success of Falmouth. Falcan's research showed that the position, a moment. that the
I'm gonna
position
hold
of
you to your-
Sustainability Director.
I'm going to hold you to your 2 minutes. You've got
Okay.
about 20 seconds.
So we need a grant writer. We don't need a grant writer. We need a person that has the vision to bring this town forward during this critical time. And if we want to leave a legacy to our children, our legacy should be that we are leaders in the clean economy on the Cape, and and our legacy be that this beautiful natural world of our coastal community is important to us, and we are willing to do hard work and make tough decisions to make her cleaner and more sustained.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other public comment? Yes, sir.
I'm Stephen Tom, Precinct 2, and I'll just add my 2 cents about the Sustainability Director. I think this position is critical to the planning and taking measured steps towards a sustainable future by implementing advanced energy systems while accessing substantial financial incentives, and by addressing coastal resiliency planning, including dealing with predicted sea level rise. Filling the position is a responsible step towards long-term cost savings and cost avoidance, and I feel that without this proactive position, we're likely to be unprepared when it comes to facing critical climate and environmental risks that will impact every resident of Falmouth. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, any last public comment? Okay, we will move on to the town manager's preliminary report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 2 committee interviews, or 2 committees with vacancies for which the board will be interviewing candidates. The Agricultural Commission has 1 vacancy and there is 1 applicant. There are 2 applicants for the 1 vacancy on the Commission on Substance Use. We have 1 hearing tonight. That is a wetlands dock hearing for Kathleen White at 209 Sea Pit Road in East Falmouth. The applicant seeks to amend an existing pier permit. The application has been approved by the Conservation Commission. Marine Environmental Services staff have not identified any shellfish concerns. Moving on to the business agenda. The first item is to discuss and vote a 5% local retirement cost of living, or COLA, option. The Falmouth Retirement Board has voted to increase the cost of living adjustment received by current Town of Falmouth retirees for this fiscal year from 3% to 5%. Under state law, this adjustment is normally capped at 3%. Due to higher inflation rates this year, the Commonwealth adopted legislation allowing municipal retirement boards to increase the COLA to 5% for fiscal year 2023. For reference, the COLA for Social Security as of January 2023 was 8.7%. It should be noted that per state law and Falmouth local adoption, this increase is applied to a maximum of $14,000, even if the retiree's annual pension allowance is far greater than that. An individual retiree will receive an increase of up to $280. The Retirement Board estimates the total cost of this increase for 450 retirees over the actuarial life of all of those retirees will result in an annual increase of $105,864 per year. This cost increase will not take effect until the next valuation study is complete. The cost to the town is significant, but it is hard to argue with the need. The next item on your agenda is an update on the so-called Emerald properties for affordable housing and a community play space. Town Planner Jed Cornock and Housing Coordinator Kim Fish will outline a plan to pursue multiple uses of these 2 parcels as directed by the Select Board. Mass Housing Partnership commissioned a due diligence engineering report at no cost to the town. This report identifies a limited footprint for potential development due to conservation restrictions. We will be seeking input from the board on a concept plan for the site and authorization to proceed with community engagement. Subject to board approval, a request for proposals will be developed based on community input to solicit private developers interested in constructing affordable housing at this property. The community play space would proceed separately with an application to the Community Preservation Committee. Next on your agenda is a change of manager for the Cape Verdean Club. Town staff reviewed the application and raised no concerns. The board deferred action on this application when it appeared on the January 30th agenda as the manager was not in attendance. The manager has confirmed her attendance for this meeting. The next item is to discuss and consider a vote to call a special town meeting for April 10th, 2023. As the board has heard, the Finance Committee did not include the Sustainability Coordinator position in the budget being recommended to town meeting. One reason cited is that the position will not be added to the position classification plan until after Article 29 on the annual town meeting warrant is approved. One solution to this procedural concern is to hold a special town meeting within the annual. We would take up additions to the position classification plan before the operating budget in the special town meeting warrant, which would allow both the sustainability coordinator and the assistant park superintendent to be added before the budget vote. The Finance Committee could potentially revisit its position on these two positions, which have not been included in the budget recommendation. The Select Board could also move to amend the budget to add these positions, even if the Finance Committee chooses not to include them in the main motion. The next item on your agenda is to vote article recommendations for the annual town meeting. There are 13 articles that the board is responsible for providing a recommendation to town meeting, and you have in your packet draft explanations of these articles. The town meeting warrant book with recommendations and explanations needs to be sent to the printer by March 10th. So there will not be another opportunity to vote recommendations unless a meeting is added to the Select Board's calendar for March 6th. The next item on your agenda is to authorize a SAFER grant application. We seek the board's approval to apply for a SAFER grant to pay for the wages and benefits of 6 firefighter, EMT, or paramedic positions. If successful, this grant would pay for up to 100% of the cost of these positions for 3 years. We will not know whether or not the town will receive this grant until June 2023 at the soonest, which is to say after town meeting and after the ballot vote. I want to emphasize that an override is needed to create a reliable long-term funding source, whether or not the town receives this grant, which provides only temporary funding. And lastly, on your business agenda, we seek a board vote on confirming the name of the Hatchville Fire Station. The 5 existing fire stations are all named for the neighborhood in which they are located. Chief Smith and I recommend the new station be referred to as the Hatchville Fire Station. Previously, the station has been referred to as the Sandwich Road Station. And I would suggest that this naming does not trigger the naming, that this affirmation of the name of the station does not trigger the naming policy procedure, as the station is not being named after a person. We then proceed to the consent agenda. There are 5 license approvals on the consent agenda, of which 4 are recurring special one-day liquor licenses for the Cape Cod Fairgrounds, and 1 is a common victualler license for Cape Cod Bagel, which is undergoing a change in ownership. All applications have been reviewed for completeness, and no staff concerns have been raised. Under administrative orders on the consent agenda, there are 3 routine and self-explanatory items, and I'll comment briefly on the 3 others. There is a conservation restriction for 0 Boxbury Hill Road, which was previously approved by the board, but the state legal review team required a revision, so it needs to be voted again. Next, we have a request from the Falmouth Housing Trust, a private nonprofit, which recently received a comprehensive permit to construct 4 additional affordable units on Sam Turner Road. They seek a waiver of permit fees consistent with board policy. The Falmouth Housing Trust has submitted an application for funds from the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund as well. That application is under review and will be brought to the board for consideration at a future date. Finally, as you know, the cost estimate for the wastewater treatment facility improvements is $9.5 million more than estimated last April. Voters at the May 2022 town election approved a debt exemption for this project. We seek the board's approval of the enclosed application to be submitted to the Bureau of Accounts at the Department of Revenue, which will determine whether a second ballot measure is required in order for the debt for this additional $9.5 million to be exempted from the Proposition 2.5 levy limit. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson-Staub. We will move into committee interviews. Agricultural Commission, Stanwood Ingram. Would you come up to the podium, please?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Stan Ingram, Precinct 2.
Okay. Anything you would like to tell us about your desire to serve on this board?
I have served on the Agricultural Commission before, so this is just going back to what I've done.
Questions from the board?
No, I'm familiar.
Mr. Patterson?
Just to attest that I've seen Stan in the Ag Committee, many committee meetings, and he's done an excellent job, and I know that's where his heart is.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Just comment that I'm familiar with Mr. Ingram's work, and he's been very active on the committee before, and I think he would continue to do a good job.
Okay. Do I hear a motion for the unexpired term ending 6/30/2023?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
service. Okay, Commission on Substance Use. There is one vacancy. We have 2 applicants. We have Richard Corey.
There's actually, so Beverly Costa-Ciavola, Chair of the Commission, we actually have 2 openings, which should have been made clear.
Okay.
And we have the 2 applicants, one of which is here. I don't see Rabbi Lieberman.
Oh, he's
There he is in
here.
the corner. So we do,
Okay.
so we do have 2 openings.
Thank you very much for that.
I only see one.
I only have it as 1.
And do you know what the term is for the second position, the second opening?
They're all the,
Yeah.
it's the same. So we had one of our commissioners
Okay.
resign for health reasons.
Just a minute. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson-Staub, would you comment?
Yeah, so under the board's policy, we advertised the vacancies. We advertised 1 vacancy, and if that's an error, I apologize, but I think for tonight, we need to limit the appointment to 1 seat.
And we'll have to do it again.
Okay.
Okay. But we can interview Rabbi Lieberman, please.
Good evening, Elias Lieberman, Precinct 8.
Okay, we have received your application. Is there anything you would like to speak to the board about your application, or anything else we should know? You're pretty well known.
Thank you. Just to express my desire and commitment to do this work. Any of us who reads the Enterprise and reads the police log every week realizes what challenges our community faces in terms of substance use disorder. And I'd like to try to make a contribution to moving that effort forward.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the board? Mr. Patterson?
Just a comment, I think any pastor of any faith, is dealing with this on a member basis, be it the member or their children or grandchildren. So I know you're involved in this on a continuing basis. I think you'd be a suitable person to actually help out on this committee. Thank you.
Any other question or comments?
I have one question. Have you had any opportunity to attend any of the meetings?
I have.
Good,
Yes.
thank you.
Not many, but I have.
Okay.
Okay, we will interview the other applicant. Thank you,
Thank you.
Rabbi Lieberman. And that is Richard Corey.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I am well. We have an application.
Yeah.
Okay, we do have your application. Would you like to say anything to the board?
Well, I've been in the recovery field for over 25 years. I've been mentoring men and women for over 23 years. I've worked at Gosnell part-time. I've worked at the Soup Kitchen at St. Barnabas part-time. Vice president of Babe Ruth Baseball at one time or another. I own a landscape business in this town. I was born and raised in this town, and too many people in our community are dying.
Mm-hmm.
I work at my full-time job, along with my landscape business, as I work for the Barnstable County Sheriff as a recovery coach. I've been there since 2020. So I've been in the community the recovery field for quite a long time. And it's about time I stepped out of my comfort zone and tried to get involved in my community in a different capacity.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I have a question.
Yes.
It just doesn't say on your application. Have you attended any of the meetings?
No, I have not.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Patterson?
Do you have any formal training in terms of counseling and coaching?
I'm a certified recovery coach in the field of recovery.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I would comment that I think Mr. Corey's certainly got a strong background and would be appropriate for the job as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will take any nominations. You've got two incredible candidates.
I'm sorry, I don't know if this is proper, but may I defer my application for the second open position?
You may.
I'd be happy to do that.
You may.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would move Richard Corey, the term ending 6/30/2024 for the Commission on Substance Use.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. And at our next meeting, I would like to have Rabbi Lieberman come back.
Well, we'll clarify first the number of vacancies.
Please.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Congratulations, Ricky Corey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi, for doing that.
Okay, we are now going to move into a public hearing. And I would ask that Ms. Scott Price read the public hearing notice.
The Falmouth Select Board will hold a public hearing under Section 240-14.8 Wetlands Regulations of the zoning bylaws of the Town of Falmouth on Monday, February 27, 2023, at 6:45 p.m. in the Select Board Meeting Room, Falmouth Town Hall, 59 Town Hall Square, on the application of Kathleen A. White, trustee, Kathleen A. White Revocable Trust, for permission to modify the existing permitted pier by converting the end portion to a ramp and float located at 209 Sea Pit Road, East Falmouth, MA. Area affected is Childs River. Interested parties may review the file on this hearing at the office of the Select Board. Per order of the Select Board, publication dates Friday, February 10th, 2023, and Friday, February 17th, 2023, Falmouth Enterprise.
Thank you. And you're here to represent the applicant. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, Madam Chairman. For the record, Michael Borselli, Falmouth Engineering.
Thank you. And I'm going to hold you to 10 minutes.
I'm hoping it's 5 minutes.
Well, that's what we like to hear.
For the record again, Mike Borselli, Falmouth Engineering, and I represent the applicant, Kathleen White. She owns a property at 209 Sea Pit Road. There's a existing house and existing fully licensed and permitted fixed pier at the property. And we're here tonight asking your permission to modify the pier. You have a zoning bylaw that says when you ever do anything within a wetland resource, we need a special permit from you before the work can be done.
Mm-hmm.
So this pier was approved in the mid-2000s as an entirely fixed pier, including the end with the L that I'm circling here. The problem is with the fixed pier at low tides, it's difficult for the applicant to access the boat to the point where she needs to navigate down a ladder that's mounted to the side of the fixed pier. So as a solution to making for easier access, we're proposing to modify the end to eliminate the fixed pier, mount a ramp to the end of the 4-foot wide section of the pier, install the pilings in and around a proposed float so that the float will rise and fall with the tides and the applicant can make access to the float down the ramp at low tide and gain access to our boat more easily. So there'll be no expansion, no lengthening, no widening. It'll be within the same exact footprint. The same number of pilings will be used. We have been before the Conservation Commission, and they voted to issue a approval through an order of conditions. That sums it up. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions, comments from the board?
Mr. Morcelli, so this is a modification of an existing permit?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions from the board?
Oh,
Any
seems pretty
questions or
simple.
comments from the public regarding this hearing application? Okay, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will close the all those in favor of closing the hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Discussion amongst the board.
I just commented, I think it's a pretty simple improvement and doesn't require much consideration, so I'd be in favor of it.
You
Mr. Brown just said.
I
you
would,
could add a motion?
I would
Yes.
agree as well, Mr. Okay, did you make that a motion?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
Only 2.5 minutes.
Thank you.
Well done. Okay, we're going to move into business. Discuss and vote 5% local retirement COLA option. Mr. Johnson-Staub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I mentioned earlier, the Falmouth Retirement Board has requested Select Board's consideration and approval for this increase to the cost of living adjustment effective this fiscal year for current Falmouth retirees, going from 3% to 5%.
Questions, comments from the board?
I would comment that it's a help and wish we could do more.
Second.
Okay, is that a motion?
That's a motion. I move approval.
Okay, I have a motion and a second.
I think
Yes.
we do have, do we
Oh,
need
we
to
do
read
have
the
a
specific motion?
stated motion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Doug, I'll take this
You
one.
wanna
I motion to grant an increase to the cost of living adjustment from 3% to 5% on a maximum base retirement allowance of $14,000 for FY 2023 pursuant to Chapter 269 of the Acts of 2022.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Third.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Emerald Property Affordable Housing and Community Play Space. And we have slated you for 10 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. For the record, my name is Jed Cornock. I'm the town planner. I'm here tonight with Kim Fish, our housing coordinator. And as Peter mentioned, we're here to outline the plan to bring multiple uses to the Emerald Properties project. As you can see on the screen, I'm just going to make sure we can all see it. Let's go with that. We also are seeking your input on the master plan concept, which I'll get to in the presentation in a few minutes. And lastly, as Peter mentioned, we're seeking your approval to move into the next stage, which will be the civic engagement program. And I'll highlight more of that, what that looks like in the next few slides. I just want to clarify, we provided this presentation to you. It's a lot of content. So we're going to try to be as brief as possible tonight, considering the audience and your full agenda. But please stop us at any point if you have any questions. But we'll try to be as brief as possible, but also be as thorough as we can. So topics we want to discuss tonight, do a very basic introduction of the project, also go over some primary goals, review some data and some local stories that we're all familiar with. I'll be discussing the master plan concept itself and then process and timelines and next steps. So basically, to introduce the project, as you can see on the screen, the idea is to bring those three uses together onto these two properties. The idea of addressing the affordable housing crisis by creating affordable housing on the site itself, including the accessible play space that all of you are very familiar with, but also preserving the existing Emerald House property and the community gardens that are currently on the property. At this point, I'm just going to pass the baton over to Kim.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kim Fish, the housing coordinator. So the project has 5 primary goals. The first is to create a consensus on a master plan for the properties. Second, address the ongoing housing crisis. Third, develop more accessible recreation opportunities. Fourth, preserve the existing historical and community resources. And fifth is to ensure the public is included in the process. Here on this slide, it shows the details of the area median income as it pertains to the affordable housing. We've included in this the 100% and 120% that you don't see very often. It's greatly needed in our community. The state does not provide funding for the development of it, but the Falmouth Affordable Housing Fund is able to do so. This slide shows the rent limits as set by the Housing and Urban Development by the size of the unit for each income category. Because of our AMI, the area median income for Barnstable County is $115,600. It has increased significantly what the rent limits are set at. This illustrates how difficult for even what is considered affordable is for families to actually afford. Next, we wanted to highlight the housing crisis from a local perspective. This slide is referencing a couple of stories from the series the Falmouth Enterprise ran weekly called The Faces of Affordable Housing. Next, we want to highlight the housing crisis from a local, Then we want to go into more detail about the actual properties themselves. As you know, this project includes 2 parcels on Davisville Road adjacent to East Falmouth School. Number 67 Davisville Road is in the Public Use Zoning District. It's just under 5 acres, and it was acquired in 1995 for public recreation and conservation. It has Article 97 protection on it, which means it can't be used for any other purpose other than public recreation and conservation without town meeting and state legislature approval. Number 81 Davisville Road is in Residential A zoning district. It's just under 4 acres, and it was acquired in 2007 for public recreation and municipal purposes. No Article 97 protection is on it. The town requested and was granted free technical assistance from Mass Housing Partnership. They retained the services of Bowler Engineering to complete a due diligence report describing the site zoning, resource areas, and infrastructure, and also created a conceptual design plans that help show how the pieces of the puzzle might fit together. This slide shows a few takeaways from both. And now I'll toss it back to Jed for the planning aspect of the project. Thank you.
Thank you.
So back in 2020, oddly enough, just about 3 years ago to the day, Peter stood up here and described the current plan, and that's what we're showing here. In 2020, it included the Emerald House property, which is shown in blue, the 2 community garden phases, which are shown in green. The second phase was for an expansion. It included this white area, which is the shared access and parking area, and obviously the orange is the playground at the time. And again, this dotted line here indicates the demarcation between 67 Davisville Road and 81 Davisville Road. So what we've worked hard on is trying to, as Kim just mentioned, fit all of these pieces of the puzzle together and allow them to basically fit all on the site. So we have this slide, which is sort of a zoomed out version. The next slide will zoom in a little bit and provide more detail. But as Kim mentioned, this 81 Davisville Road parcel does not carry Article 97 protection, and that's why we tried to locate the housing on that parcel. And meanwhile, 67 Davisville allows for public recreation. Again, that's the reason for moving the accessible play space onto that parcel, and also keeping the community gardens intact as well as the Emerald House property. So a zoomed in version, you can see those pieces to the puzzle, as we keep indicating, on essentially the right side of, or the east side of the parcels. What you will see here, shaded in white, is it's a 200-foot riverfront boundary. And essentially, development isn't necessarily precluded from that area, but it is a more stringent process where an applicant would have to demonstrate that there's no other practical alternative to putting development there. So it's a restriction that we're trying to honor, and that's why all of the pieces are located on the eastern side of the properties versus being within that area. And again, as I mentioned, not having Article 97 protection, that's why the housing is located on 81 Davisville. You may notice that there's a road that comes through the property of the community gardens. I believe they were before you just recently looking for an expansion of their community gardens. It's just important to illustrate that this development scheme is essentially just for illustrative purposes only. It's really just to get the conversation started about how these pieces all fit together. So this slide shows a very simplified version of the process. The first stage is all about planning these pieces together. That's the stage we're in now. And again, we're here to seek your approval to move to stage 2, which is where we bring this concept to community or committees locally, affordable housing committees, CPC, et cetera, and then ultimately bring it to the public in a public meeting. And then bring all of that information back to you folks after all of that, so that we can start talking about what we heard during that process and start outlining some of the things that you might want to include in the request for proposals for just the housing component. And then obviously stage 4 and 5 speak for themselves. So in terms of the timeline, as you know, we're still in February. Today actually feels like February, so it's a nice reminder that it is actually still winter. Next month, with your authorization, we'll move into that civic engagement program. I just highlighted some of the committees that we would be providing this same presentation to, but then also holding a public meeting in May. And then again, bringing all that information back to you to discuss what we heard. Issuing potentially a request for proposals in July, and then ultimately awarding a contract and transferring the land by the end of the year. Again, all conceptual in nature. But the idea here is that the affordable housing component would be separate from the community play space. So this slide essentially just is a step-by-step process when developing a request for proposals. I know most of you are familiar with that step. I just want to highlight that there's a lot in this slide, but we're essentially right at the beginning. We're developing our goals. We've already conducted that initial feasibility, and now we want to move to the public engagement program where we start soliciting feedback on this development proposal. And now here are some of the draft elements for that RFP. Again, I just want to highlight for everyone, these are draft ideas. What we've learned from our consulting with Mass Housing Partnership is that there's sort of a narrow window for the RFP. We don't want to make it too specific because that may create a development scheme that is just not attractive to developers, but we also need to be mindful of the things that we can't control. And so some of the things that we've included in here are, for example, a range of bedrooms. The idea is to bring this concept forward to the public and see what they think. You may remember that master plan slide that shows the 44 bedrooms, but the range essentially allows for some flexibility in that RFP. There's also a range of income levels that we would be incorporating in that RFP, but also a percentage for local preference. So again, a lot of topics that we want to bring forward to the public, get their reaction to it, and then bring it all back to you. How are we going to do that? So first and foremost, as you may remember, the Affordable Housing Fund granted $25,000 for this effort. And part of that funding we're used to contract with Co-Urbanize. If you're familiar with it, it's a web-based public engagement platform. We basically have a project webpage, which I'm going to give you a tour of in just a second. That project webpage explains what the project is. We will include this presentation on there. there'll be a series of questions that we want to ask folks about the concept itself, and we will, of course, have all of those questions in a paper format so that, if filling out a paper survey is easier for folks, they'll have that opportunity to do so. So I'm just going to take you on a quick tour and hope that this link works. So this is our web page. Scrolling down, just a brief introduction as to what this project is all about, the reason for doing it. Again, those public benefits that I went through initially. And importantly here, folks can subscribe to an email service, so when there are new events or new notifications, new updates that we might have, they'll actually get that just like they subscribe to the town news. So they can subscribe to that, but also provide their feedback right on the webpage itself. Scrolling back up, information about the project. I won't scroll through it, but again, it's a summary of what we just described. Kim and I will be working very closely on providing regular updates about the project, things that we might want to talk about with the public, but also advertising the public meeting that, given your authorization to move forward, we would start looking to schedule. This is the draft timeline. Importantly, this is where the public can provide us the feedback. So there's a list of 10 questions. So for example, where do you live in town? Give us more information about how long you've been here. And then importantly, what do you think about that master plan concept? So these are open-ended questions. So this is a way of gathering all that information that we then ultimately bring back to you and provide you with a summary of what we heard. And then last but not least, a little bit of history, bless you.
Thank you.
About the Emerald properties, its significance, and the current uses on the site. So with that, that concludes our presentation. If there's any questions, we're happy to answer them. But we look forward to working on this project in the near future. So,
Questions or comments from the board? Mr. Patterson?
Have you considered a package treatment facility for the sewage that's being created there and maybe incorporating the school, the elementary school, and the businesses? That intersection is loaded with businesses. It seems like an opportunity to maybe put in a fairly localized treatment facility that would far exceed the septic system approach. I know IAs can help, but I'm not sure that a more sophisticated centralized system wouldn't be a better way to go, and would be easier for us to manage and easier for the tenants of all of these properties to actually be able to stay in compliance.
Dare I say that that's probably the most complicated subject, and we've spent an awful lot of time on it. It's certainly something that we've discussed internally. It's absolutely something that we'll be discussing with the public. It's on the table, but also it creates higher costs too, so it's a consideration for certainly going out and discussing that with folks. But we spend an awful lot of time on that subject.
I mean, the town's done this before in the New Silver Beach community, and connected the North Falmouth Elementary School to it. So there's a community benefit to this, and I think we should be looking at it from that perspective as well.
Mr. Brown?
I wonder about the play space. I think originally it was a little more than 2 acres, and now it's 1.5, and I wonder how that will work, because the space was taking up almost all of that 2.5 acres. Have you thought through the impacts of that?
Yeah, in fact, we just met with Kathleen last week, and we're hopeful that 1.5 acres will be enough. But again, we're just in the initial phases, but we're going to try to do our best to try and fit everything into that little window.
And if I could, the line that you indicated there is really not the limit of work. That's just a delineation that you've chosen because of the topography. Is that correct?
The purple line, the riverfront?
The first one. There's 2 of them. One is the 100-foot setback from the river, and then there's another one which is the actual 100-foot buffer, and then the third purple line, which is right at the development, and I don't think that really is any conservation restriction or anything. It's just a chosen point. Is that
This
correct?
is a 200-foot boundary from the riverfront. So this is the area in which this whole white area is essentially, you know, I'm not an expert in the field, but my understanding is that you can do development there, but it's extremely onerous and it could be cost prohibitive.
That's
So-
only 200 feet, that whole section there, huh?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, 200 feet from the river.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Questions or comments from the board? Ms. Haynes?
I just want to say, I have been swayed to go with the project, but I know the 1.5 acres is not enough. The playground is built on a 3-acre plan, and we discussed that buffer in the white, it could be possible to extend the play space into that in a way that wouldn't be as costly or prohibitive as it would for housing.
Okay.
Housing to do it, it's a whole big complicated mess.
Mhm.
But to extend the play space into that area might work.
Okay.
So-
We're also talking about going with the architect to design the play space to see if he can arrange things in the play space so it fits in that 1.5 acres, because the 3 acres is huge property. So we have talked about doing that. But on the whole, I don't have much choice. But it includes play space in a way that, right now, the play space doesn't exist. So, I'm for the plan. I just hope that we can go over that white area some to make the play space what it was meant to be.
So you'll continue to have those conversations. We're at the beginning.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yep.
Well, thank you all very much.
I do have
Your
one.
work. Thank you, Kathleen.
One final about
Mr.
the
Brown?
development potential. I wonder about the idea of just putting out an RFP for a developer. I wonder if maybe it should be an RFQ for an architect to design this, to maximize the site first, and then consider the RFP?
Certainly something to look into, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we need to take some sort of vote on this?
So, yeah, if I could follow up on that last point and then, yeah, clarify if we have direction from the board to move forward. So Jed and Kim, we received some guidance from Mass Housing Partnership about the request for proposal process, and I just wanted to surface that in light of Mr. Brown's question. What we have been advised is that if we try to design the project, it will become subject to state procurement requirements, prevailing wage, and filed subbids and bids. So the path that we're trying to pursue at the recommendation of Mass Housing Partnership, and this is traditionally the way municipalities proceed when they're developing town land for affordable housing, is you write an RFP with very broad parameters. You don't design it. You don't say this is how many units. You don't say this is what it's going to look like. Because again, if you do, then it becomes cost prohibitive. They have to bid it as a municipal project, even though the idea here, and I should clarify, the idea is not for the town to be the landlord, right? The idea is a request for proposals to sell the land to a developer for a very specific development project. So the town would be in the driver's seat in terms of setting out the broad criteria and deciding whether or not to proceed, evaluating the proposals that are received and then deciding whether or not to go ahead and sell the land and proceed with one of those developers.
Does the fact that we're not really likely to get state funding for this give us more latitude?
No.
Same rules, huh?
It's strange, but that's state procurement law.
But true.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So it doesn't list it as a vote, but would you like to take a vote to measure the board's
If there's a
approval?
if there's a consensus of the board that you like the process and the basic concept plan here of the uses, then that's fine. That's all we need.
Yeah, I think it looks great.
I think it looks fabulous as well.
I'll second that.
So I'm going to say, Mr. Brown, are you,
Oh, I'm on board with it. I just trying to clarify how it's going to work.
Mr. Zelinski?
I'm certainly comfortable with it going to the next step until they have another update for us.
Okay, so I think you can,
Should we move a vote? Are you looking
I
for-
think we have consensus.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that we need to vote. I think at this point, for them to move forward, I think they have consensus, and I think as we get further down the line, we'll be looking at a vote.
Okay.
Super.
But you certainly have our stamp of approval.
Thank you.
And thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Application for a change of officers, directors, and a change of manager at the Cape Verdean Club of Falmouth, Inc., located at 126 Sandwich Road, East Falmouth.
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
Madam Chair, before we get started, I just would like to acknowledge that I am a member of the Cape Verdean Club.
Thank you. Okay, we have your application. Do we have questions from the board? Mr. Brown?
I asked a question last time about the residency of the manager. I don't know which one you ladies.
That's me.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm just curious about how much time do you think you'll be able to be available? And
So I'm actually a member of the 102nd Intelligence Wing, so I'm down here every single day.
Okay.
And then my sister lives in Mashpee, my brother lives in Mashpee, my mother lives in Falmouth, so I'm down here every single day.
Okay, and the other reason we were hoping to see you was just to remind you that you're gonna be the one in charge of the responsibility for the liquor license.
Yes.
So everything day to day is gonna be
Yes,
falling
sir.
back to you if any
Yes, sir.
trouble. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir, I completely understand.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions, Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, just, do you have any experience in doing that? I mean, I assume you're trained.
Yes.
Okay. And so, do you have any experience in managing a club like the Cape Verdean Club?
I've been a member for about, since 2016. So I've always been on one of the committees in the military. So I have a lot of experience in managing others, managing projects. I worked for the wing commander, so I think I'm pretty good at managing things. And I am starting my own business, so I do have a lot of managerial.
I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you to introduce yourself.
Oh.
So everybody knows.
Oh, sorry. My name's Andrea Diggs. I am a lifelong member of Cape Cod. I was born and raised in Mashpee, 47 years old, so, I'm a lifelong member. My family's always been a member of the Cape Verdean Club. And like I said, I am 25 years plus at the 102nd Intelligence Wing, working on my 26th year, so I'm always here. I think I have a lot of experience in running things, and I think my military background gives me a lot of experience as well.
Okay,
Well, thank you for your service as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
that's it for me.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair, I'd move approval.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Nope.
Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, discuss and consider vote to call a special town meeting, April 10th, 2023. Mr. Johnson-Staub?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I indicated earlier, the reason to consider a special town meeting, which would be called for the first night of town meeting, would be to give the board an opportunity to add the two positions that were included in your strategic plan and included in my recommended budget, but to this point have not been included in the Finance Committee recommendations because of procedural issues. So the first position is the Assistant Park Superintendent position. That is a position that had existed for many years, and unbeknownst to me, back in 2012, I think it was, that position was removed from the classification plan. So I was not aware it needed to be added back in. So without a special town meeting, we would need to wait till November in order to have that position added to the classification plan and then added to the budget. And then the second position, as you know, is the Sustainability Coordinator position. And that position with that specific title was included in the board's strategic plan. And that is on the town meeting warrant, but it is on for Article 29, which comes after the budget. And some members of the Finance Committee felt that that vote should really take place before the position is added to the budget. So with the special town meeting is one of sort of three potential options, I suppose, for the board's consideration. And that special town meeting would address both of those positions. So I'll call that option one. Option two would be to ask the town moderator to take Article 29 out of order and take it up before the operating budget. So that's another avenue that the board could pursue. And then option 3 would be to wait till November for both of these positions.
What about the option to amend? Is that,
So that is, that still needs to be, I think it's still, you could potentially try to amend it and then get into a sort of a big procedural discussion about whether it's appropriate to put it in the budget before it's been added to the town classification plan. So I
Okay.
wouldn't suggest that.
Okay.
But it's an element of these options because, you know, the Finance Committee may or may not change their recommendation before town meeting. So if the board proceeds with either a special town meeting or getting Article 29 taken out of order, you may still need to amend
Amend the budget.
the Finance Committee's recommended
okay.
budget.
I don't know how other board members feel. These positions came up in our strategic planning. And I understand that the Finance Committee didn't recommend them. And it feels to me like they didn't recommend them for some procedural concerns. And I think it's incumbent upon this board to do what we can do to correct those procedural issues in any way that we can to support these positions going forward. We've talked about sustainability for a long time. I know it's a coordinator's position, and I'm fine with that. I just think we need to move it forward in any way that we can. And I'm not sure how the board feels. Mr. Brown?
I could clarify, if we choose to pursue the taking 29 out of order, it doesn't fix the assistant park superintendent position. So I would be in favor of doing the special permit special town meeting suggestion.
And I think that is the only way to correct both. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. I think when we were first discussing it, and it was just for one of the positions, I wasn't sure if it was worth it to do a special town meeting, but now that there's 2 very important positions, I think it's worth doing.
And it's just within the town meeting. It's just
Right.
a procedural break, take it up, and then go back to work.
And the moderator does the heavy lifting on that.
Right.
So do I have a motion?
I move that we request to form a special town meeting for consideration of the 2 articles that are with procedural issues. I don't know if that's the proper word.
Madam
Yes.
Chair, may I help with the motion?
Could you help with the motion,
Sure.
please?
So we need 2 votes tonight. One, and I apologize, I probably could have had a motion spelled out for you in advance. The first vote is simply to call a special town meeting for April 10th, period. And then the second is to announce that the warrant for the special town meeting will close on March 1st. And then we will need to have a subsequent vote on March 6th, so you'll need to schedule an additional meeting that's not on your calendar in order to vote the actual warrant. So to your point, Mr. Brown, about what the special town meeting is about, you don't need to vote that tonight because you have to wait for the warrant to close.
I see. Okay. I move that we have a special town meeting on April 10th.
I'll second Mr. Brown's motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. And the second motion?
The second motion to close the special town meeting warrant on March 1st.
I move that we close the special town meeting warrant on March 1st.
Again, I'll second Mr. Brown's motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further conversation from the board? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Madam Chair, I will not be available on March 6th for that vote.
Okay. Good point. Remember, the board will need to meet to take up that one issue on March 6th.
Okay.
Okay, moving forward, we are going to vote article recommendations for the April 23rd annual town meeting. And I believe we begin with Article 14, is that correct? And I can read the article to see if the town will vote to rescind its acceptance of Section 48 of Chapter 31 of General Laws, Civil Service for Fire and Police Forces, with which acceptance was done pursuant to Article 54 of the February 12th, 1936 town meeting. Provided, however, that such rescission shall not affect any contractual rights or civil service rights already in existence and will only apply to the civil service rights of successor employees, reserving and collectively bargained rights, or do not take any other action on this matter on request of the Select Board.
We've touched on this topic before. I'm happy to address any questions the board may have.
What is the specific motion we need to make? Do we just say we want to
To
vote?
vote to recommend the
Vote to
article.
recommend Article 14.
Madam Chair, I vote to recommend Article 14
As printed?
as printed.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion amongst the board? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Article 15. And I'm going to keep Article 15, the conversation around Article 15 very tight. We have received dozens of emails on both sides of Article 15. And I want to remind you that Article 15 is not about a wind project. It is about allowing offshore wind developers the right to entry to conduct soil investigations. It is not, the board has not taken a stance on the project, so we are only going to talk about the article. And I'm going to limit the conversation because, like I said, lots of you here have already written to us, and we know, I think, the board is well aware of both sides of the argument. So we will take comment on Article 15, but again, we're going to keep it rather clipped because I'd like to spend the time letting the board develop their recommendation. So would someone like to speak on Article 15? Yes, sir, in the back. Mr. Bozanowski?
Yes.
I received emails from you, correct?
Yes, you did.
Okay. You have something new?
Yes.
Okay.
Dave Buzanowski, president of the Falmouth Heights Amerivis Neighborhood Association. You've shortened my speech a little bit by eliminating the wind project specifically. We're opposed to Article 15, as you can imagine. Although Article 15 makes no mention of South Coast Wind or Mayflower Wind, nor does it make reference to the Select Board's vote on December 19th to deny South Coast access for further testing. However, make no mistake, as per the first page of the petitioner's PowerPoint on February 13th, this is to reverse the Select Board's decision not to allow further studies for offshore wind project. That's that was their PowerPoint first presentation. After nearly 4 years, 2019 to 2023, discussions pros and cons of South Coast project and a well-attended public forum at the Lawrence Public School on June 8th, 22, at which a loud and clear message of opposition to the project of Mayflower landing their cables in Falmouth Heights was delivered in overwhelming opposition by speakers. The Select Board made an informed decision to deny access for further soil testing. In a perfect world, this vote might have coalesced the community behind an effort to find a better solution to the problem. But disappointingly, this is not the case. Instead, a group has filed a divisive petition to overturn a duly elected local government body. Where have the petitioners been for the last 4 years? Then to make an even make it more divisive, the petitioners have decided to inject politics by apparently utilizing the Falmouth Democratic Town Committee mailing list to garner further support for their position. In view that the petitioner, Mrs. Carey, is also vice chair of the Democratic Town Committee, I think we can certainly connect the dots. This is not and should not be a political issue. Speaking of the petitioners, I recognize several of the names on the list, actually 5, Mrs. Carey, Ling, Bonicelli, Mueller, and Patrick, as being members of the Falmouth Energy Committee. In visiting the town website, I was disappointed to see that the members of this committee are not listed, nor are their recent meeting minutes posted. I did note, however, that on the committee's most recently published agenda, they stated, number 5, set a date to host a Mayflower Wind update. I do know from Mayflower's filing that this committee has had several briefings updated from Mayflower since 2020. But my question would be, what have they been told, what have they told, and what message have they sent to Mayflower? Granted, the petitioners did not submit the petition in the name of the committee. However, I would question the legality and appropriateness of what I presume is effectively a quorum of the members of the town Energy Committee, petitioning the town meeting to overturn the select board decision. Should this petition even be allowed? And not to mention the 5 that I did mention, I also noticed that the chair of the Energy Committee also signed it, but she was also not one of the authors of the petition. With respect to Article 15, the premise put forward, in our opinion, is not in the best interest of Falmouth. Why would the town be asked to open-endedly vote to allow any developer to conduct testing, drilling anywhere on town property for the purpose of an unspecified wind project? A project with no advance details, which specifically and clearly will not conform to local zoning bylaws. What message does this send to future developers? Clearly, not one we think that would have the best interest of Falmouth in mind. There are and should be procedures for for a project of this nature, and they shouldn't start by being preordained. In a way, that's why we're here today. Mayflower was allowed to do preliminary testing without complete details, without the commitment from the town, after which Mayflower went ahead and filed an application with the state and federal government for a project, the details of which are still undergoing change and are currently temporarily suspended. And I won't go into detail discussing the aspect of the cables, which I was going to do. But lastly, the petitioners have basically co-opted words used by the sole select board dissenting vote, and paraphrasing, we have to do our part for future generations and grandchildren. We don't disagree, but my question really is, we would ask, who is the we, and who are we referring to? It would certainly appear that most of us is that the we are the residents of the residents and small business of Falmouth Heights. The rest of the town is asking we, the residents of Falmouth Heights, and those that live along the narrow corridor of conduit to the substation. We are being asked, if not ordered by others, to bear the burden of Falmouth's part. Who is carrying and looking after Falmouth Heights? Let's work together to get this right and do the right thing for the town of Falmouth.
Thank you.
Ms. Carey?
Rosemary Carey, Precinct 5. I have prepared remarks. I can't possibly address all of the issues that the previous speaker brought up, but I would just say that the petitioners, the members of the Energy Committee, the people here who support us, we have been advocates for renewable energy, including the Falmouth Democratic Town Committee. We stand for the advancement of renewable energy, solutions to climate change, and we turn out for that. That's what we stand for. We're residents of this town, and we want our voices heard. So, like the chairwoman mentioned, this is not an approval of the entire project. It's just to allow wind developers to conduct soil testing for feasibility and safety. South Coast Wind has recently made a special effort to re-engage with Falmouth, providing answers to the Select Board's questions and the public's questions, making them available in Falmouth Enterprise, clear indications they wish to be a willing and trusted partner. While we've heard a lot of debate on the project, it's incumbent on this board and on our town to understand the full picture, the science, the environmental, the climate benefits, and the economic benefits of the project. Town of Barnstable and East Hampton, Long Island both negotiated tens of millions of dollars in community host agreements and in tax revenues. That's not money that Falmouth can just, look away from. Requiring a wind project to make a more expensive and less feasible landfall would not only increase electricity costs for all of us, it would also miss the critical window to stop or reverse global warming. We can't allow offshore wind development to be stopped in its tracks in Falmouth without understanding the complete picture. And soil testing for feasibility and safety is necessary to determine that. Our town has an obligation to make decisions based on science while representing the interests of the whole town, not just now, but for future generations. And I'll say it again, for future generations, our children, our grandchildren. That's what this is all about. I urge this board to reverse its decision, recommend Article 15, and allow the soil testing to proceed. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I have a
Thank you.
question.
And that is what you're asking, for us to rescind our decision, we're staying away from the project. Thank you.
I have
Yes.
a question.
Yes.
Ms. Carey, has your committee had any contact with Mayflower Wind?
Has our committee? Yes, we had a presentation with Mayflower Wind a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. I don't know the exact date.
And on your agenda, you invited them, was that the hosting that was referred to on the agenda?
Yeah, upcoming, March
How many times have you met with them?
once.
Who else outside of your committee was aware of that?
Well, the meetings are posted, and for people who are interested in energy matters or the future of the town are welcome to come to Falmouth Energy Committee meetings. So our meeting announcements are always posted, like every committee is, in accordance with the regulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take 2 or 3 more comments. Mr. Moriarty, and then Dr. Feynman Silva, and then I will go to you, sir, in the back. Go ahead.
David Moriarty, Precinct 6. I'm opposed to this article for a few reasons. Number one, Mayflower Wind, South Coast Wind, whatever you want to call them, they've canceled or postponed every meeting they've ever been involved with. They've wasted the resources of the town of Falmouth time and time again. Here they go again. Last Friday, they canceled another meeting in Rhode Island with the Energy Facility Siting Board. They just canceled their meeting and postponed that one again, too. So we really can't believe anything they've told us up until today. The meeting on June 8th, it was on AC cables. Had nothing to do with DC cables. That's why I asked for the meeting. That's why we had the meeting. And what did they do as soon as they granted us the meeting? They changed the project entirely. So you just can't believe anything that's coming out of this company. That's one of the reasons that I oppose Article 15. Another reason is it's just not a good fit for Falmouth, Massachusetts. We're a tourist, international, recreational destination. We are not an industrial, electric row right-of-way, okay? You just can't put a right-of-way in the middle of a congested, established, 100-year-old community. It doesn't make any sense to anyone, none of us. So I would hope, with all of the information the board has gathered, that they would stick to their original decision and not approve or endorse Article 15. Thank you very much.
Dr. Feynman Silva, and then this man, and then you, and then you. I'm only going to take a couple more because we have other articles we need to move on.
Hi, my name is Sandra Feynman Silva, and I live on 50 Davis Road here in Falmouth. And I just wanted to say, I wanted to introduce you to a concept called Sankofa, which is a Swahili concept, which means to know the past, to learn about the past, and learn from it, bring it forward, and take knowledge from the past. Our past has been illuminated by one of our fellow residents, the late Rachel Carson, who wrote several books about the death of Mother Earth and what we must do about it. Her statue is in Woods Hole. It's lovely. I bring my grandchildren there. But we have to take into consideration that we are in a crisis environmentally, and we are going to have to make sacrifices. This project, I think, is a potentially very legitimate project. There is going to be offshore wind south of Martha's Vineyard, I am sure, one way or another. If we don't take advantage of these kinds of projects, our Mother Earth is doomed to lose all of us, our species, and many other species. Martha's Vineyard already receives electricity through underwater cables that have been there for decades, maybe 100 years, I'm not sure. But we must move forward. The sustainability office person that is due to be hired, I hope, is one of the charges is to help us cope with climate change and with the potentially devastating effects that climate change will have on our coastal regions of Falmouth. And what are we going to do about that? We may have to make some radical changes. We may have to prohibit further development in coastal areas. And when we make those designations, people may have to remove those homes from the coast that are potentially bound to be flooded permanently. So I urge you, as residents of Falmouth, to really look at the big picture. Remember the past. Learn from the past that tells us what is happening in the present and could happen in the future. Thank you very much.
Sir, you're up next. Yes, you.
Greg Masmanian, Precinct 2. First of all, thank you. And I'm not in support of Article 15. I am in support of renewable energy. And I support the selectmen's choice that was done back last month. So for a moment, let's imagine it's October 2022, and I own a piece of land, and a builder approaches me, and he said, I'll build you a house. We sign a letter of intent. The builder sends me some plans, yet you have numerous fundamental questions about those plans. After many inquiries, no response, until a final request is demanded. There's a meeting, but the builder is unprepared to answer my concerns. I'll get back to you, he says. In the interim, the builder suspends his initial plan and says, we'll refile a new plan in the fall. The fall comes and goes. I'm still exploring alternatives. I'll be back to you in March. 8 months pass, and he puts a piece in your mailbox and says, here's answers to your questions. Turns out the answers are incomplete. Furthermore, he has not developed a house plan yet. Now you're at a major decision point. You sort out, is this the builder I should really choose and invest and partner with, who has missed time frames, made unkept promises, lacked transparency, and still we don't have a plan for my house? Then, gee, do I really want him? Falmouth residents are the priority here, not the shareholders of South Coast Wind, who have not sat down with us and worked together for a solution with a positive outcome for everyone. So I ask that we really make a smart decision here and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir? And then Mr. Finneran, and then I'm going to cut off the conversation on Article 15.
Edward Jalowick, Worcester
Oh,
Court.
Mark Finneran, and then you, and then we're done. Go ahead.
Edward Jalowick, Worcester Court, Falmouth, Mass., Precinct 2. Thank you for the opportunity for citizen comment on this article, and I will dispense with all the details I emailed you on earlier in the week and just talk about the article. It would allow further testing, or any testing by any wind entity, without knowing what are they going to propose. And when you open the door and you let the camel stick his nose in your tent, very soon you've got the entire camel sleeping in your tent. For example, 3 years ago, January 2020, a wind farm had a meeting with a town official, assistant town manager, in person, talking about this proposal. Citizen input, 0. Citizen notification and discussion, 0, until just this past year. You let them in, they start testing, we don't know what's going on, what they're proposing, and suddenly you're presented with a fait accompli, as we now have before us. They have detailed plans for a wind farm coming through Falmouth, whether Falmouth wants it or not. They'll try to ram it down our throats, and we'll have things that will go in dense neighborhoods. We'll have things that propose substations next to our sole source or our main source of water, Long Pond. You want to put a power station in proximity to our watershed? The chemistry, the equipment that would be required for a substation is incredible. Recent filings with federal agency just this past month. The cooling required for a converter station offshore for AC generated by the turbines, convert it to high voltage DC, and bring it ashore in Falmouth would require 10 million gallons of cooling water per day. You bring that DC power ashore and bring it up to Gifford Street, and you need to bring it back to AC. You then need to cool that equipment with an equivalent thermal device. You're not going to have seawater 10 million gallons a day. You're going to have either huge fans, cooling towers, compressors, condensers. I spent a half hour on a seminar by mechanical engineering experts from GE. How do you cool down that equipment? The equipment required, the toxic chemistry required to treat those coolants, incredible. You want to put that next to our water resource? Insane. Absolutely insane. And this is what's happened when you let the camel put his nose in your tent. You don't know what they're planning, you don't know why, but you're saying, go ahead and test. And suddenly, a couple of years down the road, you have something they're trying to ram down your throat. Disallow this article, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Finneran, and then I have someone right after you. And I apologize, I should have taken you first.
Mark Finneran, 98 Grand Ave. I'm absolutely against this project. I look out every morning and perhaps evening when I shower, and I look exactly where this thing is going to go. But I'm also a member of the ZBA, and I'd like to, I'm not still speaking as just a citizen and taxpayer, but I'd like to point out to you that this is only to save money. This belongs rooted directly to the Canal Power Plant. If it lands on Cape Cod, everyone here and everyone on Cape Cod is going to pay for this through their energy delivery portion of their electric bill, which, as everyone knows, is the highest portion. But also, follow up on Ed's camel under the tent, you're going to go down a slippery slope, and you're going to allow a for-profit company who simply wants to unload here to save money to have carte blanche to negate all of our zoning bylaws, and that is absolutely unacceptable. And I think that is something that you should consider, and I think you probably considered it before when you voted correctly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Finneran.
Well, again, Stephen Tom, Precinct 2. I didn't expect that it would be such an emotional discussion, you were very clear, Madam Chairwoman, that this was not a discussion about approving a given wind project. This was a question of whether or not the board should rescind a decision that was made about allowing testing and exploration on the part of any wind project. And for that matter, I'm not even sure that it's only limited by precedent to wind projects. It seems to me that the board's job is to do its homework, and all of the leadership of the town with regard to projects such as offshore wind, that you need to listen to the science and the research. And my understanding, and by the way, I am a member of the Falmouth Democratic Town Committee. I'm not a member of the Energy Committee, but I'm here to support your changing your minds about a decision you made, because I think that your job is to enable research and exploration and gathering of data, which I presume would be shared with you at some point. And it's important for our leaders to understand the scope and scale of any project that you're going to have to make a decision on. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that perhaps will address the concerns of the people in this room who oppose your changing your minds. But I'm suggesting that you have homework to do, and you've basically put a block on the research that you should be doing and allowing and accessing the results of in order to make a much larger decision. So I do support reversing your decision, because I think it was a bad decision. I think it closed the door on research that you need to be doing and allowing.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead. I'd like to move this along. We've got other articles as well.
No, just real quick. Robert Dugan, and it's just a procedural question, and I'm the deputy captain of Precinct 2. If this was presented as a petitioner's article, but if there was a quorum of a committee.
I have that question for our attorney.
Okay, so.
So go ahead and ask the question.
Yeah, so my question just is, if it was done by a
committee,
committee and it's not being presented by a committee and it wasn't put on an agenda for a vote, can you actually put this forward to town meeting as an article, since you can't separate yourself from the committee? That was just my question. So not on what the actual warrant article is, but just the procedure of it.
Thank you. Attorney O'Keefe, could you come up and answer that question, whether this article was designed correctly and sort of presented to us correctly?
I don't see any conflation of the duties. A petition article like this can be submitted by anyone about anything, and so it's of no import that it happened to be submitted by a quorum of a particular committee.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir, you are absolutely it. I'm not taking anybody else.
I'm Charles Rader, Precinct 2, Elvira Avenue. I want to make a suggestion to the board that this is a matter where there's so much interest and importance to the town that you should be interested in how the town meeting votes. You get to keep the control however the town meeting votes. In effect, this is an advisory article, and the town meeting process also allows amendments which may deal with some of the objections that the people opposing it have made, and there may be some amendments in the other direction. I think it's a very valuable opportunity for you to get a more clear vision of what the town wants and not biasing it by a recommendation. That's my suggestion.
Thank you. Okay. I think we need to take time to discuss our recommendation.
Madam Chair, I have a lot of thoughts, and they go back to, well, further back than our December 19th vote, but I think it's really important to put some things into context. So as has been stated, there was a lot of conversation, or one-way conversation, mostly asking Mayflower, South Coast. I'm going to say Mayflower for the sake of history. Mayflower to present to the town. That didn't happen for a long time. We finally had them, and we asked them a bunch of questions, and when we took the vote on December 19th, we didn't have an answer to those questions, which had been 6 months. And I thought, when I was thinking about the way to vote, I was considering, here is a corporation backed by Shell Oil, which is one of the corporations that got us into the mess that we're in. And so my vote, my thought of my vote was an attempt to hold them accountable, an attempt to say, we asked you questions, we wanted information from you, you haven't provided them, so here is the only measure that we have to make you do the things that we want you to do, which is simply, at the time, answer our questions. And so that was the perspective that I was coming in at. And I since then have found it really frustrating and problematic. People have said to me, well, you're not thinking about the future. I'm 34. I don't even have children yet. So I'm thinking about my own future in addition to other futures. But I still felt like that particular vote was made in a good effort to hold this company accountable. And so I think that things have changed. They have changed plans. They have answered some of our questions. And Peter can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there's anything stopping them from coming back to us and asking us for the same thing.
Correct.
There's been nothing stopping Mayflower Wind from saying, Select Board, we heard your concerns, we listened to your meeting, because there was somebody here at the meeting, and saying, we heard your concerns, we're willing to work with you, here's answers to your questions, what else can we do? And we'd like to resubmit the question, the opportunity to do this, this testing. And they haven't done that. And so I understand the premise of this article, I truly do, but I think the vote that I will at least say that I made on December 19th was what I thought was in the best interest at the time, and so I don't think the appropriate thing to do is to rescind that. I think the appropriate thing would be for the company who wants to do this testing to come forward and say, we've heard you, we're willing to work with you, and actually prove that they're willing to work with us and not just say it, and ask us again, and not a blanket opportunity. So that's my thoughts.
I would agree with you 100%, and I would add to that, I heard someone come up and say that they have been reaching out and trying to work with the town. I'm not seeing that. The fact that they answered our questions 8 months later, and the first part of the questions that were answered actually came from the enterprise. So I can't in good conscience just say, I will reverse my vote and anyone can come in and do this. I don't think that's in the best interest of the town. I also agree with you that any wind or alternative energy can come to this board, demonstrate that they want to partner with the board, align with the board, and do what's best for this town. I am completely open to that. But to give carte blanche and then to say, I will rescind my decision and let them come in, is not something I'm willing to do at this time. But if they were to present another project and we could make it work, because I don't think there's anybody on this board that isn't interested in alternative energy and making it work. But you have to work with us. And just because I may not agree with somebody doesn't mean I haven't done my research, because I have. But this particular company has not met us halfway. And that's why I cannot rescind my vote.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Zelinski?
We've heard this discussion so eloquently driven towards us about what our responsibilities are and how we have an obligation. We also have an obligation to show compassion and empathy for the neighbors and the communities that are most directly involved, impacted by this. And I don't think, you know, our political bravery has been put into question as pressure to rescind our votes. I think it is brave to stand with your community and preserve the neighborhoods in it. And for the people that don't agree, then we'll agree to disagree. But I am with the chair and the vice chair on this. They haven't showed me enough. If I was told that there was no other option, then I may think differently. I may urge people to be a little more open, but there are other options. I want to see them before I before I throw the dart in the dartboard with this. So, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Mr. Brown?
I would say, reading the answers to the questions has only really strengthened my resolve that these people are not dealing in good faith with us. And I know this particular article is not about one particular company, but that's all we've been dealing with. If I had known in the initial discussion, when we said that Surf Drive was our utility choice and that was our first choice for location, if I had known that for several years they had already decided that Heights was their only place, they should have never agreed to that. And that was disingenuous. So I just don't think there's any real hope of getting straight answers from this company. It's my hope that some other company will come along with a better proposal and a better negotiating skill, because I'm just not impressed with this crew. So I'm not willing to change my vote.
Any other comments, Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, well, let me come in sort of in opposition. I'm going to stick with the same position that I did. I think this is a communication problem. I think this is a matter of trying to get through to the people who actually have an understanding of how to answer those questions. It's a big corporation. It's got a lot of entities. I don't think they put their brightest, well, I shouldn't say that, but I don't think that they put the people that could actually address the questions out in front. And so what we're seeing really is a corporation that's really trying to figure out exactly what kind of a system they need, or that we need, quite honestly. I think you can look at the statistics right now, and renewable energy generation sources are less expensive than all of the other fossil fuel generated sources right now. To cut off the communication at this point, I think, is to cut off our nose to spite our faces. We need renewable energy sources. This thing won't get built out for 5 to 10 years once they actually come up with a plan. There's a long process to figure out everything. So they're nowhere near ready, I don't believe, to answer the questions that we probably would like to have to make us feel comfortable that allowing them to come through Falmouth, wherever, is a feasible thing to do, and whether it's in the best interest of the citizens of this community. But honest to goodness, if we don't start doing something about accepting renewable energy, when those fossil fuel resources become ever more expensive, and they will because there's only so much of it, we're going to get stuck with the bill. And we might not have as many alternatives to figure out what, in fact, is sort of the least impactful for our town, just to allow this to happen. I think the other thing I want to say is, in an electric grid, where the electricity is inserted into the grid, those people get the energy first. They are the appliance that pulls the energy out. You put a short circuit in it, run it right to the ground, guess what? It all goes into the ground. If we're the people that are going to use that energy, we will be the beneficiaries. It's not going to be something where all the energy gets sent off Cape. That's not the way it works. The energy gets used where it's needed. And if it lands in the grid in our community, wherever it be, Gifford Street or up on Thomas Landers Road, we are the ones that will actually be the first source. And I want to mention one other thing. One of the reasons that we have higher rates than most of the rest of New England is because we're farther from the sources of the electricity. There are what's called line losses. The wires do have resistance and they do give off some of that energy. And then guess what? We have to cover those costs because we're the user of the energy that's provided. You could say it's the responsibility of ISO New England or these power companies to build it into the cost and spread it to everybody. But the truth of the matter is, we pay more because we're farther from the sources that generate that energy. That plant up on the canal is basically a backup plant. I haven't seen it work, and I don't think anybody has actually seen it work for probably 15 years. And so it's a fossil fuel plant. So, and I think one of the reasons that it was shut down, of course, at one point, when I first landed here on the Cape 30-some years ago, it was a coal-fired plant. They've converted over to natural gas, which is better, but they let out an awful lot of pollutants that were drifting from west to east across the Cape and creating actually health issues associated with the sulfur dioxides that were being emitted from those stacks. So we're in a better position health-wise because they have essentially stopped using it except to hold it in place in case in an emergency they need to provide it. And ISO New England is the company that's responsible for making sure that everybody in their area gets electricity when they need it, barring storms and that sort of thing. But I just have a rough time thinking that we're doing the right thing for the benefit of the people of Falmouth if we deny alternative energy sources that could be available and even at a lower cost.
Ms. Scott Price?
One thing I just want to clarify and kind of challenge is this idea that we cut off communication with Mayflower Wind. Again, I'll reiterate, I think our vote was to hold them accountable and not with the expectation that they would not come back. I could not see a company like that saying, oh, well, the select board made one vote, so we're just going to move on. I did not expect that. I would not expect that from a company like Mayflower Wind or any large corporation. It was to essentially force their hand to give us something. And I think maybe it worked. Maybe that's why we got the answers to some of the questions, maybe not. But I also just want to reiterate, it's not that we don't support the science or we don't support the renewable energy. It is about this company and the way that they have, for lack of working with the town. And for me, it's really difficult to move past the fact that they are literally funded by one of the corporations that got us into this mess. So it feels very disingenuous for them to say, well, we realize that we're the reason you got into this mess, but we're not willing to work with you to get out of it. It needs to be done, so for the sake of renewable energy, just let us do it. And so that is where I get stuck. And at some point, there's going to be a balance, or at some point, we're going to have to make a decision of which principle is more important. But I think until they come back to us, I stand by the principle of holding them accountable.
And it's not a be-all or end-all situation. I disagree with that completely, that just because we are going to uphold, or some of us are going to uphold our previous vote, that we're saying no to renewable energy. That is not true from my perspective, for my vote. What it does mean is we're not going to be bullied by any side, that Mayflower can't just come in here without working with us. That's not okay. It's no business or no business plan just goes in and rolls over people and then refuses to respond to us. That's the issue. It's not about the renewable energy. It's about getting a company in here that will work with us, align themselves with this town, and do what's best and meet all of the goals. And that's what I want to see. I don't want to see, I don't want to be pushed around by somebody who just simply walks out of this meeting room and never responds to us again.
And going forward, I'm going to say, the past practice of them only speaking to the town manager and then have the town manager speak to us and relay the information, limited information, just doesn't work for me. They need to have representatives come here and answer questions directly in this boardroom.
And to this community.
Right.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Brown. Did you send an email to Mayflower?
I did.
To ask a question? Was it responded to?
It was not.
Okay. There's your case in point right there.
Right.
That is unacceptable to me. So I think the board needs to make a decision on the recommendation.
I recommend indefinite postponement of Article 15.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
No.
4-1. Article 15. Article 15, actually Article 16. Thank you so very much.
So, Madam Chair, this is...
Might as well recess for.
Okay. Falmouth Select Board will go into recess for 5 minutes. I also very carefully read the letter, and I'm sure everyone did, from Mr. Kasparian, and I would have to support his sentiment that this article is going to affect the business community, and there wasn't a lot of reaching out onto the community businesses. So I would recommend indefinite postponement on this article.
I know that there was some discussion, Madam Chair, if I may, of working with the businesses to try to bring this along and make it more successful before it was a line drawn in the sand with it. Maybe this would urge that to take place. I don't know, but I tend to agree with you that there's not enough time for them to pick up speed on it and make the next season.
Mr. Brown?
I would say it's, as we learned when we did our Main Street closure discussion in COVID, it's not always easy to reach out to the business community. They're very busy people. This might get the conversation going.
I would agree with that.
I would say that I would not be in favor of indefinite postponement personally, because this is where the conversation happens. So, I mean, I think it's a good idea, and not just aspirationally. I agree with it.
Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, and I actually talked with Philip Gesson today. He called me. You know, his intention is to try to call attention to this growing problem. And I think it's appropriate that we recommend this to town meeting. I mean, the solution is not here. It's a problem that's got to be addressed. And I think that raising it up to that level and challenging ourselves and giving our select board, our town meeting members a chance to either endorse that or say, forget it, is important. So, I mean, we're going to run out of landfill space, and we'll be taking over residential space before you know it, if all we do is collect plastic and dump it in landfills. And we can't keep putting it in the ocean, which we've been doing, quite honestly, for an awful long time. And that's got to stop as well. So I think, you know, Philip Gesson is a young man who's trying to do the right thing, and I think this deserves the deliberation. He probably will get a positive motion on the floor, but I would rather be on the right side in this case. It's got to be addressed, and I feel like this article at least starts us.
I would move support it as printed. But
Okay, we have a motion to support the article as printed.
Second.
The motion is second. Any further discussion from the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
No. 4-1. Well done, Mr. Gesson.
That brings us to Article 19, a resolution in support of changing the state flag in Massachusetts.
Any conversation? My thought about this is that this article really supports the work of the state legislature's special commission on the official seal and motto, and it's basically to support what they're doing. So I don't have an issue.
No, I think it's good that we actually voice our support for it. Just to add to essentially this polling, I guess, of the various municipalities in support of the efforts at the state level.
is it really a state initiative? I mean, all the reading I did contradicted really the statements that are made about the intent of the sword and all the stuff. I don't really see the need for a change, but I'm not deeply involved in what's actually happening at the state level.
Thank you very much. I'm Sandra Famous Silva, Precinct 2, 50 Davis Road, and I am part of a statewide coalition of groups and individuals who are working on this particular effort. John Peters, Slow Turtle from the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, he passed away several years ago, was a friend of mine, and he worked on this initiative more than 30 years ago. This initiative has a long history, and perhaps what the select person Brown just mentioned about, well, he read online various interpretations of the symbols and imagery on the state flag that he didn't have a problem with, and have been presented as unproblematic. But from the Native American perspective in this state, they are very problematic. And this is what we really have to do. We have to be sensitive to where those symbols and images came from and how do the Native American people in our community, in our Commonwealth, feel about them. It's like a mascot. It's like the Washington Redskins. You know, I may not have a problem with that. I would have a problem if they were called, you know, the New York Jews, for example, or another stigmatizing name. I would have a problem with it. And essentially, again, I ask you to reflect on the meanings of these symbols, and I did include several of them in the article that I presented. But as was mentioned, the Massachusetts Commission that was formed by the legislature to research the state flag and seal did present to the legislature, and the legislature did vote to change the state flag and seal. So this is going to happen. What this particular petition is doing is encouraging them to move along. It's been about 2 years that they've been deliberating, and they finally, the legislative session ended in late July, the end of July. We now have a new legislative session, so we would like to have that flag and seal changed by the end of the legislative session. Our own state representative, David Vieira, sat on that committee, and he is well aware of the problematic nature of that flag. It's sitting right behind the chair of this committee, and we could deconstruct the imagery on that. When you put a sword over the head of somebody, it is not a sympathetic image. When you take a face and a body as a stereotype of a Native American and use a person who actually belongs to an upper Midwest tribe, the Chippewa, who lived in Montana, as the person who sat for a portrait after whom the image is drawn, there are problems with where those images came from. And historians and members of the community are well aware of that. And so that's what this vote is about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amongst the board?
So I read on the state of mass.gov the explanation of the reason of what all the symbols mean. Mm-hmm. And it's actually the state website. I didn't see anything about legislation to change it. I guess if you're aware of it, then that's news to me.
I can confirm that a commission was formed to study the flag and make a recommendation. That the commission has asked for an extension. It has been a couple of years, but there is a commission that was formed to review the state flag and change it.
What was David Vieira's view on it?
I don't know.
So I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Oh, I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
No.
Hearing none. All those in favor? Oh,
Can I just
yes,
say, you know, symbols are really important in populations, and this, I don't think that flag represents Cape Cod. I think we have been historically, a very open and inclusive community, but this was a state thing that historically we're stuck with. And I think it's important that we change those symbols because we need to represent what our beliefs are. And openness and inclusion means you don't throw symbols at people that offend them and cut down on communication. That's the reason for my second.
okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I guess so. I'm not opposed to it.
Thank you.
That brings us to Article 29, which is to amend the town classification plan. And I guess the question here, we talked about that the board is going to call a special town meeting to address the sustainability coordinator position. Perhaps the cleaner approach here is to indefinitely postpone this article and have it addressed, all the diversity, equity, and inclusion officer position and the sustainability coordinator and the assistant park superintendent, all in the special town meeting. And then this Article 29 would no longer be necessary.
All right, I recommend indefinite postponement.
What if we're not successful at the special town meeting vote?
Then you could change your recommendation.
Well, we're in favor of this, though, right?
Yes.
So why wouldn't we endorse it?
Because we don't need it.
Because it would be redundant to your town meeting plan.
We're going to do a special town meeting.
Is there, can you put an explanation into it so that?
Absolutely. Yes.
So that town meeting members understand that we're deferring this to the special town meeting?
Absolutely.
Just wondering what the harm would be to have a positive motion on this as well as the special. I mean, it's a fallback position.
You could.
It's confusing, I think, if we indefinitely postpone this. It's as if we don't support this initiative.
I think either approach works.
Well, I would say a positive, recommend it as printed, just in case it is a fallback position.
And again, we can explain in the written explanation that if the special within the annual is approved, this article will no longer be needed.
And we'll change our recommendation.
Yep.
Because it's easier to go negative afterwards.
I agree.
I think that's the smart way to do it.
So I'm second
So we have a
Doug's motion
motion
to recommend.
to recommend approval on Article 29, and we have a
As
second.
printed,
Any
right.
further conversation from the board? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Article 30.
So Article 30 is an amendment to the fingerprint bylaw, which is an attempt to be more pragmatic in our approach and address the administrative burden on the applicants as well as the police department by changing to an every 5-year cycle for liquor license applications.
Unless it changes hands, right? That's what we talked about. Right?
Absolutely, yep. A change of manager or a new license would always require a fingerprint background check.
I move we recommend this article as printed.
I'll second Mr. Patterson's motion.
We have a motion and a second to recommend Article 30 as printed. Any further discussion amongst the board? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Article 31 is to amend the Code of Falmouth with respect to vehicles for hire and removing the specific insurance requirements from the bylaw so that they can be set administratively to reflect what is affordable and what meets the town's requirements.
Move approval.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve Article 31 as written. Any further discussion amongst the board? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Article 32.
Article 32 is also to amend the Code of Falmouth. This is to amend the flow-neutral bylaw, and it is an amendment that is needed in order to qualify the town for zero-interest loans from the Clean Water Trust State Revolving Fund. The substance of the change is to identify the amount of flow for each sewer service area. It does not change the basic structure of what is or is not, and what the criteria are for variances.
I would move Article 32 as printed.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve Article 32 as written. Any further discussion amongst the board? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Article 34.
Another amendment to the Code of Falmouth, and this is to the stable regulations, to essentially delete the regulations and give the authority to promulgate regulations to the Board of Health.
Yes, 33. Sorry about that.
Okay. Well, I agree with this, but in the first line of your explanation, I think the wording just needs to be shifted around there to keep the office open. Right now, it's got.
I'm sorry, am I in the wrong article?
So we're on
Number 34?
33.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I said 34, which is what threw you off, Mr. Patterson, instead of 33.
Thanks for
I'll take
being-
the hit for that one.
Okay, thanks.
I would move Article 33 as printed.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to move Article 33 as printed. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Article 34.
So Article 34 is to accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 110A, to authorize the town clerk's office to remain closed on all Saturdays and to treat Saturdays as a legal holiday. And thank you, Mr. Patterson. Yes, there is some correction needed to the first sentence of the explanation.
I move that we recommend Article 34 as printed, or as as edited.
As amended?
Well, the vote is to recommend not the explanation, but the article.
Excuse me, then I move that we recommend the article as printed.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve Article 34 as written. Any further discussion among the board? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Article 35.
Article 35 is to grant an easement to Eversource, and this is essentially an amendment to the easement that was granted last year with the recommendation of the Select Board by town meeting. As Eversource got further into the design of the Martha's Vineyard reliability project, where they're adding an additional electric undersea cable that comes onto land for reliability of Martha's Vineyard power, nothing to do with offshore wind. And the board, we negotiated an agreement with Eversource where they agreed to mitigate, provide mitigation with a value of $800,000 for those easements. This is an amendment to that easement, specifically for the municipal parking lot at Depot Avenue. And they will be resurfacing that parking lot as part of this project.
I would move, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I would move to recommend this article.
Okay,
A second?
we have a motion and a second to recommend Article 35 as written. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
And I believe that's it.
That's
for
it.
the select board. Okay, moving forward. I'm going to go through the consent agenda. If any,
Wait, we have a couple more.
what do you have? Oh, I'm sorry, Safer Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So I am seeking the board's approval to submit an application for a SAFER grant for 6 positions, wages and benefits for 6 positions. This dovetails with the board's plan to support an override. The total number of firefighters to be hired is 14, which is the staffing requirement for fully staffing in a sustainable manner all 6 stations when the new station comes online. The SAFER grant dovetails with the override. The override funds approximately 8 positions. The SAFER grant would be temporary, 3-year funding, and we did get confirmation it would be, if we are successful, which it's a competitive application process, so we cannot assume that we will be. But if we do get the grant, it would be for 100% of wages and benefits for the 6 that we're applying for, unless, you know, I suppose they could award less, but it is 100% for each of 3 years is the point.
I think we're perfectly positioned. Building a new fire station, override for 8 at our own expense, and asking for this to finish it off. I'd be surprised if they say no.
You did beat that drum hard.
I was going to say, you're going to make the motion, Mr. Brown?
I
I'm
move
waiting
that
for
we
you.
authorize the application for SAFER grant to fund additional fire department personnel.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Confirm the name of the Hatchville Fire Station.
So I think this is pretty self-explanatory. It has been called Sandwich Road Fire Station. I'm not really sure why that was the initial name given to it, but all of the other stations are named for a neighborhood. And Chief Smith and I would recommend that we refer to this station as the Hatchville Fire Station.
Where I grew up in Hatchville.
Then you have to recuse yourself.
So be it.
No,
You want to make that Hatchville motion?
I will.
It does put on the right part
Okay, we have
of
a-
sandwich.
Do you have a motion and a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to confirm the name of the Hatchville Fire Station. Any further discussion among the board? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now I can go to the consent agenda. I'm going to read through the consent agenda. If you want to hold anything, please notify the chair. Under licenses, application for a special one-day all alcohol liquor license, Bands for Badges, Inc., Cape Cod Fairgrounds, 8/12/23. Application for a special one-day wine and malt liquor license, Food Truck Festivals of America LLC, Cape Cod Food Truck and Craft Beer Festival, Cape Cod Fairgrounds, 8/5/23. Application for special one-day all alcohol liquor license belonging to each other, Inc., Third Clatter Bowl, Trade Center Bowl, 89 Spring Bars Road, Saturday, 3/18/23. Application for a pledge of license of all alcohol in holder license Seacrest Concierge Concessionary, thank you, Mr. Patterson, LLC, doing business as Seacrest Concessionary located on 350 Quaker Road in North Falmouth. Application for a common victular license, J2 Bagels, Inc., doing business as Cape Cod Bagels, located at 419 Palmer Ave in Falmouth. Administrative orders, approve Eversource petition to install approximately 39 feet of 1-inch conduit and cable under Town Road, Westmoreland Drive, starting at existing pole 1102/5. This work is necessary to provide electric service to 30 Westmoreland Drive. Approve Eversource petition to install on private property one new pull box to be labeled 10600/0110 and to install approximately 130 feet of 2 to 4 inch conduit and cable under Town Road northwesterly, starting at the pull box 10600/010. This work is necessary to provide electric service to 267 Clinton Ave. Approve request to spend over $500 from the Fire and Rescue Department donation account for the purchase of challenge coins. Vote to approve the request from the 300 Committee for a conservation restriction for the Ed Brown Lager 3.72 property acre at 0 Boxbury Hill Road. Approve request from the Falmouth Housing Trust, Inc. for a waiver of the building permit fees for Sam Turner Road, Esker Place modification, affordable housing project. Authorize application to Division of Local Services for determination of whether a second referendum is required due to the increasing cost for the wastewater treatment facility improvement project. I'll entertain a motion to move the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further conversation, discussion from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes, review and vote to approve minutes of meetings, public session January 23, 2023, and February 13th, 2023.
I did review them. Hold on a second, let me get to them. And there were edits that I think need to be made. For instance, the article numbers are incorrect. So let's see. Yes, if you look on page 3, there are quite a few changes. The very first one should be Article 13. The next paragraph should be Article 14. And then Article 15 is not covered at all. And all of the indexing of the numbers are not quite right. So we may want to ask if this comes back, because it does not match our discussions of the draft articles, and I don't think we really changed any of the numbering.
So I'm trying to remember the timing. We did change the numbering at one point, but I honestly don't recall if that was before or after this meeting. We had an additional article at one point for reauthorizing borrowing, which we ended up taking care of as part of the wastewater treatment article. But truly, I don't remember if that was before or after the Sam. You may well be right.
Let's send them back.
Okay, but Article 15 is not covered at all, so. Unless it was 16, because it says Article 16 through 9 are petitioners' articles. So anyway, again, communication is important, so, yeah, can we go back and double check that.
Give me the date on that again. Is that January 23rd or February 13th, Mr.
It's
Patterson?
it's the first one, I'm sorry,
Okay,
let me get the
January
right.
23rd. I'm gonna
Right,
send
yeah.
it back. Thank you. All right, let's look at February 13th, 2023.
Yeah. Let's see, on page 5, where it says, presentation of petition articles for April 2023 meeting, in the middle, there's a sentence that says, she said that the article would reverse a select board, but I think it really should be, would recommend the select board rescind its decision. Just the way it's worded, it doesn't come across as reflecting what the actions were, that's all. I just don't want it to become an issue. Does that,
I mean, I think she may have said that, because
You said-
I think it's accurate.
would reverse a select board decision not to grant permission to,
Right.
okay, all
It's a
right.
double negative.
It is a
Yeah, it is a double
negative,
negative.
and that's why
That's,
it's
yeah,
confusing.
yeah, okay,
Yes,
all
it is
right.
what she said. Any other comments on the 13th, Mr. Patterson?
No, one other, it's a nit, I guess, but on the very fast, it says motion by and then motion by, and so I think that just needs to get cleaned up, and I would say motion to adjourn by Angela Scott Price, and get rid of the to adjourn at 9:15. So it's just simply, well, you can see, if you want to get the time in there, but it's got some double words in there that just need to be smoothed out. And so with that, but that minor edit, then I would recommend that we approve the meeting minutes of Monday, February 13th, 2023, and release for public access.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of February 13th, 2023. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Town manager supplemental report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to let the board know that with respect to the police chief selection process, I have decided to incorporate a citizen panel, actually 3 citizen panels. And this was something that came up in conversation with the search consultant as well as the Human Resources Director, Susan Lumping. Following a model that the consultant has used in other communities, these panels will contain a mix of staff members and community members. We will prepare a set of questions that each panel will ask each candidate, and the panelists will provide quality feedback to me on each candidate as part of my decision-making process. The citizen panel interviews will be part of the confidential evaluation process that takes place coincident with the assessment center. We feel it is important to maintain a neutral environment for the interviews and to protect the confidentiality of the applicants, so the interviews will not be open to the public. That's just an update on the process for the board and the community. I do have some staffing updates for the month of February. There were 9 positions that were filled. They are a local inspector position in the building department, an administrative clerk position, that's a part-time position in the town accountant office, a volunteer coordinator for the senior services department, a data collector and field appraiser in the assessor's department, a library aide, a part-time conservation agent, a temporary on-call local inspector, a communications officer in the communications department, otherwise known as dispatch, and a temporary on-call network administrator for information technology. There were 7 vacancies in the month of February, and you will note, you'll see, I'll run through them quickly, some of them have already been filled. There was a new communications officer position, a laborer in the parks department, an administrative clerk in the assessor's office, a special officer in the police department, a student officer in the police department, and the part-time conservation agent and part-time local inspector position. Upcoming meetings, you will be meeting on March 6th. That is in addition to your calendar, as we mentioned. That meeting is needed to call the special town meeting. March 13th, we have a meeting, and a couple of items that we have so far are discussion of options for expanding tax exemptions and abatements. The Cape Cod Commission has been invited for an update, and we have multiple hearings. I think it may be 4 or 5 hearings for that date, so it's a heavy workload for hearings that night. March 27th, we've tentatively scheduled a discussion of the status of the Nobska Light land disposition with respect to the federal government. April 1st, you have a Saturday workshop, as we've discussed, to address selected policies and board training. And then, of course, annual town meeting April 10th. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson-Staub. Select board reports.
I attended the planning board meeting last week, and I noticed that they had the short-term rental discussion on their agenda, so I went to make my comments on that, and I was encouraging them to consider taking action of some sort, although I wasn't clear what action that would be, but maybe they should start to think about short-term rentals having an impact. And I got a kind of a mixed review response. Some members felt it was something that they should take up. One member felt like I was being intrusive over people's personal property rights, and who am I to say that what they can do with their property, which is a natural, normal response. And I noticed that on the news this week, there was a report that 37% of the property sold on Cape Cod last year was sold to second home buyers, and that now that the pandemic is over, many of them are becoming short-term rentals. So that really indicates a large problem, I think, so I want to continue to talk about that. There was other interesting issues on the planning board with some developments, and accessory apartments are almost every meeting, there's an accessory apartment on there, so I'd like to see that. So I also attended a League of Women Voters meet and greet event. It was at the old Peking Palace restaurant there. And it was really nice to get to know some of those folks. It was just informal, we all talked about who we were and where we grew up and what we do, and so it was interesting and nice. So I had a good time. And that's about it for my report.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, Mr. Patterson?
Yes, we had a community subdivision gathering yesterday. We try to do it a couple of times a year. Of course, we were wiped out by the pandemic, but we started it up again. But, the issues of short-term rentals, properties being bought for business purposes. I think we have 3 in our subdivision of 50 homes, and it's growing quickly. So it's really changing the Cape. It's not unique to Falmouth or to my community, but all over the Cape, we have basically homes that used to be residents for families, not being used for families anymore, and being purchased and not even being occupied for a lot of the time, because these are second, third homes, and they're really being operated as business properties. And it's just changing the complexion of our neighborhood. Now, we probably have, well, I shouldn't even say, we have quite a few homes that really aren't occupied, but for very short periods of time during the whole year. And here we are in a housing crisis. So I think, this is not true just to Falmouth. I hear it on the Cape and Islands Municipal Leaders Association meetings. This short-term rental is a problem for our society, our community, and for providing us with the kind of professionals that we need to service our various needs. Firemen, police, teachers, healthcare workers. And the percentage I heard, I think I mentioned it before, but I'll say it again because it astounded me, that approximately 50% of the people that work on Cape Cod drive across the bridges. And that is just unreal. That is such a huge change since I moved here 30 years ago. And no wonder we have big traffic jams, coming into town from east and west both. So, anyway, big issues. I don't know how we're going to get a handle on them, but I think the only way is going to be working together as a region, and not just, we can't control it just as a town. And the other thing is, what are our options to limit the amount of conversions from residential property into short-term rental? And there are communities that are working on it. I think Amherst has actually passed some kind of a regulation that tries to limit the amount of that. But it's It's rampant right now,
Mm-hmm.
and you can understand why. Great place to have a business property that you can come and vacation on, you know.
And make money.
And make money at it. Pay the mortgage.
Ms. Price?
I attended the Affordable Housing Committee meeting last week, or I think it was last week, had some great discussion about projects in the pipeline. It's a good meeting, that's all I've got.
Great. Mr. Zelinski?
Madam Chair, I attended the Finance Committee meeting the other night. It was very informative on the warrant articles, and I reached out to Captain Lowen from Falmouth Police Department, and they've got me set up for all of the morning, the daytime shift and the evening shift, so I'll be with them for 2 full shifts tomorrow. And I'd like to recognize his efforts for that. I mean, I'm looking forward to it.
That's great.
Nice.
Any discussion of future agenda items? I think you made a couple.
We have a few already
Yeah.
we're working on.
Okay. Anything else? Then I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Gladly. I mean, second.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.